Hardly more than a quarter century after Henry Luce proclaimed the American century, American confidence has fallen to a low ebb. Those who recently dreamed of world power now despair of governing the city of New York. Defeat in Vietnam, economic stagnation, and the impending exhaustion of natural resources have produced a mood of pessimism in higher circles, which spreads through the rest of society as people lose faith in their leaders. The same crisis of confidence grips other capitalist countries as well. In Europe, the growing strength of communist parties, the revival of fascist movements, and a wave of terrorism all testify, in different ways, to the weakness of established regimes and to the exhaustion of established tradition. Even Canada, a long bastion of stolid bourgeois dependability, now faces, in the separatist movement in Quebec, a threat to its very existence as a nation. The international dimensions of the current malaise indicate that it cannot be attributed to an American failure of nerve. Bourgeois society seems everywhere to have used up its store of constructive ideas. It has lost both the capacity and the will to confront the difficulties that threaten to overwhelm it. The political crisis of capitalism reflects a general crisis of Western culture, which reveals itself in a pervasive despair of understanding the course of modern history or of subjecting it to rational direction. Liberalism, the political theory of the ascendant bourgeois, long ago lost the capacity to explain events in the world of the welfare state and the multinational corporation. Nothing has taken its place. Politically bankrupt, liberalism is intellectually bankrupt as well. The sciences it has fostered, once confident of their ability to dispel the darkness of the ages, no longer provide satisfactory explanations of the phenomena they profess to elucidate. Neoclassical economic theory cannot explain the coexistence of unemployment and inflation. Sociology retreats from the attempt to outline a general theory of modern society. Academic psychology retreats from the challenge of Freud into the measurement of trivia. The natural sciences, having made exaggerated claims for themselves, now hasten to announce that science offers no miracle cures for social problems. In the humanities, demoralization has reached the point of a general admission that humanistic study has nothing to contribute to an understanding of the modern world. Philosophers no longer explain the nature of things or pretend to tell us how to live. Students of literature treat the text not as a representation of the real world, but as a reflection of the artist's inner state of mind. Historians admit to a sense of irrelevance in history in David Donald's words, and of the bleakness of a new era we are entering. Because liberal culture has always depended so heavily on the study of history, the collapse of that culture finds an especially poignant illustration in the collapse of the historical faith, which formerly surrounded the record of public events with an aura of moral dignity, patriotism, and political optimism. Historians in the past assumed that men learned from their previous mistakes. Now that the future appears troubled and uncertain, the past appears irrelevant even to those who devote their lives to investigating it. The age of abundance has ended, Donald writes. The lessons taught by the American past are today not merely irrelevant, but dangerous. Perhaps my most useful function would be to disenthrall students from the spell of history, to help them see the irrelevance of the past, to remind them to what a limited extent humans control their own destiny. Such is the view from the top, the despairing view of the future now widely shared by those who govern society, shape public opinion, and supervise the scientific knowledge on which society depends. If, on the other hand, we ask what the common man thinks about his prospects, We find plenty of evidence to confirm the impression that the modern world faces the future without hope. But we also find another side of the picture, which qualifies that impression and suggests that Western civilization may yet generate the moral resources to transcend its present crisis. A pervasive distrust of those in power has made society increasingly difficult to govern, as the governing class repeatedly complains without understanding its own contribution to the difficulty. But this same distrust may furnish the basis of a new capacity for self-government, which would end by doing away with the need that gives rise to a governing class in the first place. What looks to political scientists like voter apathy may represent a healthy skepticism about a political system in which public lying has become endemic and routine. A distrust of experts may help to diminish the dependence on experts that has crippled the capacity for self-help. Modern bureaucracy has undermined earlier traditions of local action, the revival and extension of which holds out the only hope that a decent society will emerge from the wreckage of capitalism. The inadequacy of solutions dictated from above now forces people to invent solutions from below. Disenchantment with governmental bureaucracies has begun to extend to corporate bureaucracies as well, the real centres of power in contemporary society. In small towns and crowded urban neighbourhoods, even in suburbs, men and women have initiated modest experiments in cooperation, designed to defend their rights against the corporations and the state. The flight from politics, as it appears to the managerial and political elite, may signify the citizens' growing unwillingness to take part in the political system as a consumer of prefabricated spectacles. It may signify, in other words, not a retreat from politics at all, but the beginnings of a general political revolt. Much could be written about the signs of new life in the United States. This book, however, describes a way of life that is dying, the culture of competitive individualism, which in its decadence has carried the logic of individualism to the extreme of a war of all against all, the pursuit of happiness to the dead end of a narcissistic preoccupation with the self. Strategies of narcissistic survival now present themselves as emancipation from the repressive conditions of the past, thus giving rise to a cultural revolution that reproduces the worst features of the collapsing civilization it claims to criticize. Cultural radicalism has become so fashionable and so pernicious in the support it unwittingly provides for the status quo that any criticism of contemporary society that hopes to get beneath the surface has to criticize, at the same time, much of what currently goes under the name of radicalism. Events have rendered liberationist critiques of modern society hopelessly out of date, and much of an earlier Marxist critique as well. Many radicals still direct their indignation against the authoritarian family, repressive sexual morality, literary censorship, the work ethic, and other foundations of bourgeois order that have been weakened or destroyed by advanced capitalism itself. These radicals do not see that the authoritarian personality no longer represents the prototype of the economic man. Economic man himself has given way to the psychological man of our times, the final product of bourgeois individualism. The new narcissist is haunted not by guilt but by anxiety. He seeks not to inflict his own certainties on others, but to find a meaning in life. Liberated from the superstitions of the past, he doubts even the reality of his own existence. Superficially relaxed and tolerant, he finds little use for dogmas of racial and ethnic purity, but at the same time forfeits the security of group loyalties and regards everyone as a rival for the favours conferred by a paternalistic state. His sexual attitudes are permissive rather than puritanical. even though his emancipation from ancient taboos brings him no sexual peace. Fiercely competitive in his demand for approval and acclaim, he distrusts competition because he associates it unconsciously with the unbridled urge to destroy. Hence, he repudiates the competitive ideologies that flourished at an earlier stage of capitalist development and distrusts even their limited expression in sports and games. He extols cooperation and teamwork while harbouring deeply antisocial impulses. He praises respect for rules and regulations in the secret belief that they do not apply to himself. Acquisitive in the sense that his cravings have no limits, he does not accumulate goods and provisions against the future in the manner of the acquisitive individualist of 19th century political economy, but demands immediate gratification and lives in a state of restless, perpetually unsatisfied desire. The narcissist has no interest in the future because, in part, he has so little interest in the past. He finds it difficult to internalize happy associations or to create a store of loving memories with which to face the latter part of his life, which under the best of conditions always brings sadness and pain. In a narcissistic society, a society that gives increasing prominence and encouragement to narcissistic traits, the cultural devaluation of the past reflects not only the poverty of the prevailing ideologies, which have lost their grip on reality and abandoned the attempt to master it, but the poverty of the narcissist's inner life. A society that has made nostalgia a marketable commodity on the cultural exchange quickly repudiates the suggestion that life in the past was in any important way better than life today. Having trivialized the past by equating it with outmoded styles of consumption, discarded fashions and attitudes, people today resent anyone who draws on the past in serious discussions of contemporary conditions, or attempts to use the past as a standard by which to judge the present. Current critical dogma equates every such reference to the past as itself an expression of nostalgia. As Albert Parr has observed, this kind of reasoning rules out entirely any insight gained and any values arrived at by personal experience, since such experiences are always located in the past, and therefore in the precincts of nostalgia. To discuss the complexities of our relation to the past under the heading of nostalgia substitutes sloganeering for the objective social criticism with which this attitude tries to associate itself. The fashionable sneer that now automatically greets every loving recollection of the past attempts to exploit the prejudices of a pseudo-progressive society on behalf of the status quo. But we know now, thanks to the work of Christopher Hill, E.P. Thompson, and other historians, that many radical movements in the past have drawn strength and sustenance from the myth or memory of a golden age in the still more distant past. This historical discovery reinforces the psychoanalytic insight that loving memories constitute an indispensable psychological resource in maturity, and that those who cannot fall back on the memory of loving relations in the past suffer terrible torments as a result. The belief that in some ways the past was a happier time by no means rests on a sentimental illusion, nor does it lead to a backward-looking, reactionary paralysis of political will. My own view of the past is just the opposite of David Donald. Far from regarding it as a useless encumbrance, I see the past as a political and psychological treasury from which we draw the reserves, not necessarily in the form of lessons, that we need to cope with the future. Our culture's indifference to the past, which easily shades over into active hostility and rejection, furnishes the most telling proof of that culture's bankruptcy. The prevailing attitude, so cheerful and forward-looking on the surface, derives from a narcissistic impoverishment of the psyche, and also from an inability to ground our needs in the experience of satisfaction and contentment. Instead of drawing on our own experience, We allow experts to define our needs for us and then wonder why those needs never seem to be satisfied. As people become apt pupils in learning how to need, Ivan Illich writes, the ability to shape wants from experienced satisfaction becomes a rare competence of the very rich or the seriously undersupplied. For all these reasons, the devaluation of the past has become one of the most important symptoms of the cultural crisis to which this book addresses itself, often drawing on historical experience to explain what is wrong with our present arrangements. A denial of the past, superficially progressive and optimistic, proves on closer analysis to embody the despair of a society that cannot face the future.